Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Live from the Blue Seats. It's me, producer JL, and I'm here joined by, I guess, Dave. But before we get to that, I don't know. This room seems a bit, this virtual room seems a bit crowded. Oh, wait a minute. Knock, knock. Who's there? Oh my gosh. It's Rob. He's back.
Wow.
Oh, man.
That
Look
was
at
the
that.
corniest intro I've
That
ever
was
heard.
the point, David.
We should have had the
That was
like the Stone Cold Steve Austin music queued up for like the glass break, and then we needed.
I don't want to get sued by Vince McMahon. All right.
Oh,
That's
like he's
true.
paying attention at this point. But that being said, Rob is back after having some stuff, go on outside of the podcast, even though he's paid attention. Rob has joined us again and will more than likely be with us going forward, of course, because obviously he never left. But Rob, welcome back. I'm sorry your intro was so corny, but I had to do something to really get on Dave's nerves.
Great to be back. Thanks, guys, and as always, thanks for holding it down and shepherding us and our fans and all the listeners through an absolutely brutal end to a hockey season, and into what's going to be a very interesting off season. I don't know how much detail you may or may not have shared with people. I'll be very brief. I broke my leg playing men's league hockey about 2 months ago. It was a brutal injury. Do not recommend it. However, I got amazing.
0 out of 10.
Would not rate it highly at all. I got great medical care. I have an amazing and supportive wife, Becky, who obviously still does a guest spot here and there on the pod, and hopefully we can get her on again soon. And friends and family and a lot of people that helped out, especially through the first few weeks, which were extremely challenging. But again, due to great medical care, a lot of physical therapy, I'm back on my feet. Certainly not going to be putting skates on anytime soon or even running and jumping anytime soon, but I can sort of be a functional human being in the world, which is great. So, between that and some other, life stuff in the background, it has been a little bit of a sparse season for me, but I am looking forward to being able to do this on a more regular basis, especially because, guys, as we experience today, this is a team that is in a fair bit of, I think turmoil is probably the right word, as they transition from their previous era / window of contention into a new era and window of contention. So, we can just jump right into it. And I want to kind of hear from both of you on the emotional reaction that you had to the news that Chris Kreider was finally traded after much speculation and then reporting over the last 72 hours. Dave, I'll start with you and then we'll go to JL, and I've got some thoughts as well. Emotional stuff first. Like, where does this one hit you as the Rangers, say farewell to someone who I think we can call a team legend? Now, whether or not his jersey gets retired, we can talk about that maybe, but certainly one of the most significant players ever in Ranger history.
This hits me the same way the Lundqvist buyout hits me. And this sucks. Kreider was easily my favorite player, to the point where I refused to buy his jersey because I'm cursed when it comes to buying jerseys. So actually at this point, Jess and Becky can get off my ass about that, which I guess is a nice little silver lining. But this sucks. I loved Kreider, and the return on this trade has me thinking, what the hell? Like, I know it's logical that they needed the cap space, but I'd rather have Kreider, emotionally speaking, I'd rather have Kreider finish out his career here, break a whole bunch of records, and hopefully transition to the next group of leaders, raising the cup in his final year. But now we've been robbed of that because reasons. I don't know. I'm annoyed. Emotionally, I'm annoyed. Logically, I get it.
What about you, JL?
I'm kind of numb to it. I'll be honest. I guess I'll probably feel it a bit more once the season starts or once training camp comes around and you really begin to see him in a different uniform, because it's kind of like, you know, it how can I put it? It was so used to I was so used to seeing him there, where it was always like a constant sort of thing. And even when he was injured, you knew that he was there and, always on the power play. You could see where exactly he was going to be, right in front of the net. He was going to place himself there, find Zibanejad, hugging Zibanejad at the end of games, so it wasn't something that I ever really kind of thought about. I'm a little numb, little, because also too, with the way last season transpired, and as positive as I tried to be throughout it all, as you guys, famously know, I kind of braced myself for it. So I'm still a little numb. I haven't really processed it yet emotionally. Logically, I understand, like Dave said. I can't believe I'm agreeing with Dave. I understand.
We agree more often than you think. It's just more fun to bicker with Simpsons quotes.
I am aware of this this developing, but it had to be done. You look at the prospect, Kerry Torrance. Good, speedy guy who's gritty, but like Dave said, you honestly you'd rather just keep him, because truth be told, he was probably the least one of your problems. And look, I know Nick who was also a part of our blogosphere, didn't really like him, but Kreider was very useful in many ways, more than one. Probably the best power play merchant this team has ever had, and that's not a bad thing. One of the all-time leaders in games played, goals scored. Like you don't do that off of just being there. You do that because you're good. So I think it'll hit me more once the training camp comes around and once the season starts. It's like similar to when Trouba got traded and we saw him in that Ducks uniform. That kind of threw me off a little bit, especially with the number 65. So it'll definitely be strange to see him in that orange helmet with that, white and orange uniform with 20 out west. I will say though, it is good that he's in the Western Conference, because that means we only see him twice a year. He probably will score a bunch of goals against us, but yeah, it sucks. I've been watching Kreider since I'd gotten out of college, or no, actually when I started college, actually, I that's when he started. So yeah, it's going to be odd. I'm a little bummed out, not going to lie.
Yeah. When you think about even just the years that have passed and the different iterations of the Rangers that he's been a part of, from the 2012 playoff run all the way up through last year, you can't help but put your own life experiences, up against that, right? It's like, what was I doing 13 years ago? What was my life like 13 years ago? And I think for me, Kreider might be, as I don't mind sharing this, I'm 40 years old now. That was, by the way,
welcome to your 40s, old man.
Yeah. By the way, I injured myself on my 40th birthday, which was a really weird, and kind of amazing twist of fate.
That's actually, I'm sorry, but that's actually kind of funny. I
Yes.
shouldn't laugh because I know it's a brutal injury and I wouldn't want to go through it. But on your 40th birthday, which is when like you start sneezing and throwing out your back,
Mm-hmm.
to go and do that, there's some kind of humor there.
Yeah.
So
He died doing something he loved, right? So
well, I'll just say this. Just to quickly say that this just means that Rob is impervious. Pretty much, that he was able to make it this long without sneezing and blowing out his back.
Right.
Unlike Dave, but that's beside the point.
no, I blow out my back getting out of the shower.
But the thing that, as a 40-year-old person now, I approach sports a lot more pragmatically and frankly selfishly, right? You're like, I want the team to win because I want like the investment to be worth it and for it to be fun. I want to see championships. As you start to think about, now I'm not that old, but you start to think about like, wow, I've lived, maybe a little less than half my life. I want to stay healthy. I think living into your 80s or 90s is a good goal to have. You want to see these teams that you pour a lot of your time and energy and emotions into win championships. So it's a lot more about that than it is like when you're a kid and you have kind of that really hyper emotional connections to players. I had an emotional connection to Kreider. One of my like vivid memories was going into the 2013 season, which was a lockout season. It didn't start until mid-January. I was going out with a bunch of friends to watch the opening night game. Rangers were in Boston. We were going to a bar to watch the game. People were pretty excited to have hockey back. The Rangers had just made the conference finals the year before. And I was like, I want to get like some Ranger gear to wear. And I specifically was like, I need to get a Kreider. I didn't get a jersey, but I got like the t-shirt with the name on the back. I still have that t-shirt with the name on the back, the Jersey. It is very faded. It doesn't fit me as well as it used to 13 years ago or 12 years ago, although I can still wear it. And it's just like one of those things that I remember seeing the clips of him from BC. Obviously, he had the playoff run in 2012. And I just remember feeling very invested in his individual success. Like obviously I wanted the team to do well, but I really wanted him to do well. And then as you learned about him as a person, he was an easy guy to root for. He was a little quirky, but that was also part of what made him easy to root for. And the fluency in multiple languages and the videos of him playing pianos in hotel lobbies, the friendships that he developed.
Loving dogs.
The dogs.
Oh
he did all this community work that was very behind the scenes. Like he did some of the Garden of Dreams stuff that you see on MSG, but he did a lot of stuff that you did not hear or see much about publicly. So just a very easy guy to root for. And one of those guys that, and there's a long list of them in this franchise because they have not won a lot of Stanley Cups, in the same category to me as Rattel, Gilbert, even though those guys are Hockey Hall of Famers, he's not going to get to the Hockey Hall of Fame, but like great all-time Rangers that never won a cup, right? That probably should have won a cup, that were on teams that were good enough to have won a cup. So this one does hurt. And I think one of the things that, and it's kind of, it's the 5 stages of grief, right? And where I go from like sadness to anger is so much of this is happening because last year was such an unmitigated disaster. And really like the sin of the 2024-25 Rangers, like is one that this franchise is going to have to live with for a very long time, probably until it makes its next Stanley Cup final. Because even, making the conference final at this point, you're kind of like, okay, we've been there, done that. Chris Kreider made 5 of those in his career. They're not going to wash that taste out of my mouth or out of their own mouths until they have serious success. And they are a long way from that. Because I agree with you both in that I think Kreider actually still has some good hockey left. I think there was an argument to keeping him. If you could have maybe moved some other pieces or made some other decisions last season, even with the contracts you handed out. It didn't have to come to this, but last year was such an unmitigated disaster that it did. So now, look, I can now step away from the emotional stuff, and Dave, I'll kick it back to you. On the sort of roster construction and hockey side, this is a defensible move. This is not the Pavel Buchnevich trade where you just look back on that and you're like, Drury didn't have to do that, and it was an awful trade. This is something that makes sense in a vacuum as we head into next season with Mike Sullivan. I think there is an edict to get younger and to change the identity of the team or develop an identity, something they haven't had in years, in my opinion. So Dave, your thoughts on kind of like how much sense this makes for them moving forward?
I don't know if I can answer that without seeing what Drury does, because, and we're going to get into some of the other stuff that's been out there in a bit. I don't know how much I trust Drury with cap space. He got cap space by trading Trouba, by dumping Goodrow, by trading Kakko. And what does he do? He massively overpays Will Borgen. Like Evolving Hockey had him at like 4 years, $2 million. He's got 5 years, $4.5 million. So mistake 1 there. Mistake 2, Carson Saucy. I know it's Susie. Rob, you've been out for a bit. I call him Saucy because I refuse to call him Susie. It looks like Saucy. It's Saucy.
I'm down with
it. Until we see what he does, I don't know if I can answer that. Like, it makes sense. They needed cap space and the timing of it. Kreider was the one that they could move right away without having to manage a no. Zibanejad's no move clause. Panarin's no move clause. Keandre Miller and the fact that he doesn't have a contract actually makes him harder to trade, believe it or not.
No, it does. It's true.
So he was the guy that could be moved easily. He was the guy that was going to have a lot of interest. And I do have to give Drury a little bit of credit for learning from his Goodrow Trouba disaster last year and actually informing the team step by step of how this was going to go down, informing the leaders of the team. And also on the return, giving Kreider something that he kind of wanted, which was, hey, we have this on the table. It's probably not the best offer we're going to get, but you got a coach that you want to play for. You got old friends there. You got a great destination, a young team. Zegras is going to be thrilled to play with you.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think? And, there's some image rehab going on there. So
no doubt,
there's a lot of things going on. It's just I don't know what's going. This is the first offseason where I have no idea what this team is going to do.
Yeah, well,
so I don't know
really
if I can
quickly.
answer your question.
No, it's a good answer. And really quickly, before I get your 2 cents, JL, you're right, Dave. There is definite image rehabilitation going on. MSG, meaning the company led by James Dolan, which is having its own basketball issues with Tom Thibodeau and all that nonsense, by the way. You can tell that they are very, very carefully messaging all this out, mostly through Larry Brooks, right? Like all of the, they've been in touch with Kreider the whole time. Anaheim is not expected to present any problems in terms of him waiving his no move. Kreider even was a good soldier and went out there and said, like, they did a great job keeping me informed. So like, and frankly, like that was the one other thing I wanted to say. I know, JL, you brought up Trouba. I had no emotional connection to him and I got quite sick of him at the end of his tenure, but that's fine for us to disagree on that. Kreider has handled this way better than Jacob Trouba handled it. And I think that, that just speaks to his class as an individual and really maybe one of the things that ultimately maybe frankly holds him back as an athlete a little bit, right? He almost being a little too selfless, not letting his ego get in the way, right? And I think that sometimes that plagued him on the ice. I think sometimes he didn't demand the puck or demand things that maybe in ways that would have made him an even better player. But Trouba got indignant when the Rangers approached him about a trade, whereas Kreider was very realistic, pragmatic, worked with them, and ultimately it kind of worked out for all parties involved. So, and 2 things can be true, right? Like good job by Drury and good job by the organization to do right by one of their all-time great players, but also like certainly they are pressing go on a image rehabilitation campaign right now. So those definitely good points, Dave. No, I mean, JL, any other thoughts on kind of like the hockey side of this? And I guess what do you hope they do, right? They've got this $6.5 million of cap space, additional cap space that brings them to about 15 million with plenty of business to be done between now and the draft and then free agency. So, and maybe we can segue that into some of the other rumors that have now come out as, Chris Drury, don't accuse him of being lazy. I'll say that, he's right on to the next piece of business here. It seems like with Zibanejad rumors and Keandre Miller rumors and all that stuff. So, but yeah, how do you hope or what do you think they will do with this additional cap space?
Well, I'll just say that even though I just to touch on something you said, even though I did like Trouba a lot, and that's been very well documented, I was also sick of him at the end of his tenure. I think we all were able to sort of agree on that in the sense that, like, you're right, he did become really indignant, and I think that's kind of what really kind of started this whole downward trend in terms of what went on in the locker room, because we come to find out later on that was actually a really big reason why, because of the way that he acted. Now, I understand you can be upset at your employer. I get that. All of us have been upset at the people who pay us money to work for them. But at the same time, though, sometimes you just kind of have to keep doing your job. And, it's not to say that there wasn't any injustice done, but there's a way to go about it. Right. So, and then obviously Drury is not, he's definitely complicit in what went on too, obviously. But just to touch on the hockey thing with Kreider, they did a good job in terms of making sure that everything kind of went smoothly because of how sensitive everything happened last season and how that turned into such a media, crap storm that it really did actually derail the season, and they're trying to avoid that. So kudos to Drury, kudos to Kreider for taking it like a champ and being very respectful, because ultimately they're human beings at the end of the day in the midst of business, and you have to be cordial in order for things to work out right. And I think Kreider knew that, and I think he wanted to avoid that, to kind of have this new group that's coming in, to put this burden on Mike Sullivan and, this, new group that's coming in, you want to, and then also too, if there's anything that James Dolan is about, it's about image. And, it wouldn't look good. Trouba Goudreau, different story. Even though Trouba was the captain, he was not Chris Kreider. Chris Kreider is one of your franchise stalwarts. And also, you want to bring him back when he retires, or maybe even at the end of his career, you toss him a 1-year contract and let him ride it out in the sunset. Who knows at this point? You never know what can happen within the next 2 years. But you want to, with players like that, or just players in general, but especially players like that, you want to keep, a kind of a good connection so that, if there's one thing that the Rangers do very well is their alumni network with Garden of Dreams, with, bringing people back to the Garden is phenomenal. It's top tier. It's very similar to what the Yankees do. The Mets have definitely put their alumni club up a lot since Steve Cohen came in. And that's always something that will not only bring fans to the Garden, but it's also a good connection, just in general, because maybe Kreider can come back, either when he's at the end of his career or retired and, maybe impart some wisdom, who knows. In terms of the hockey aspect of the trade, it needed to be done. I'm kind of with Dave, but also a little bit more optimistic in the sense that, what Chris Drury can do with cap space. I think the reason why he signed those players to those deals is so that he can make it easier to trade them. Now, I know he gave Will Borgen like a no trade clause or something like that, or he put a clause in his contract. But I think a lot of that was done basically just to kind of make it easier. Because you said it yourself, it's harder to trade somebody when they don't have a contract. So I think that if he plays his cards right, he has already, assets on the team that can be movable because of the fact that they already have a contract connected to the name. Now, whether or not he executes that or not remains to be seen. So it's a little hard for me, like Dave said, to really sort of, get a real good grasp. But I think also, just judging off of the return they got from Kreider, is they're trying to build a team like the Florida Panthers because they want the grit with the skill. But my only worry is that they kind of lose the skill in the search for grit, and then we're back at what happened with the John Tortorella teams, because you have a coach similar to Tortorella and Mike Sullivan, except he's a little more forward thinking, even though Tortorella has definitely gotten better in that aspect. But, I like Dave, I really can't make too much of a determination, but I think with the signing or the trade of JT Miller and, and I guess this could lead into Zibanejad and the possibly moving of Zibanejad, possibly keeping him as Miller's winger. The moving Keandre Miller because of, his deficiencies. It's kind of hard to tell, but they're trying to build the team that's tough to play against. It just all depends on whether Drury actually knows who to go for. And all signs kind of lead to next summer and trying to get Jack Eichel.
Yeah. I mean, the thing that keeps coming to mind for me is the word identity, right? And the Rangers didn't really have one. They went from a rebuilding team under David Quinn to like Gerard Gallant, just kind of like letting the guys freelance and being kind of a high skill team. Laviolette brought a little bit more structure, but I wouldn't say what he brought was identity. And then clearly that it wasn't anything that significant because it all fell apart after one season. So I think you're right in that respect, JL. Let's talk offer sheets here, Dave. And there's two players that I want to talk about, and offer sheets going one way and then the other way. So first question, do you think there's a serious chance of Will Cooley getting offer sheeted? And was that the main reason that the Rangers wanted to get this deal done and free up that space so they could protect themselves against a Will Cooley offer sheet?
That is such a loaded question. I have like 7 answers to this. The optimist in me says this trade was done to lock up Will Cooley to an 8-year contract at about, let me just get the evolving hockey. The evolving hockey. Oh my God, I can't fucking type.
Would you give him 8 years?
Oh God, yes.
Okay.
I love Will Cooley. So yeah. 8 years at $5.6 million in a heartbeat. This is evolving hockey's estimate, and they're usually within 10-15%. So you add 10%, 8 years, $6 million in a heartbeat. I'm giving Will Cooley that. You're banking on his upside. So the optimist in me thinks, yes, he has a real risk of getting offer sheeted. And yes, this is to give Kreider's money to Cooley and the Rangers finally start getting away from the bridge deals. Because I'm sick and tired of watching guys that can and will make more money later on in their careers getting bridge deals and becoming way too expensive for the Rangers to re-sign.
Mm-hmm. And then the
But
other, right? No, well, and I was going to say the other, and I said so quickly. I agree with you. It would be very out of character for them to lock up a player like this before a bridge deal, but hopefully they're thinking differently, right? And I mean, Will Cooley, to your point, JL, like he is the archetype, right? It's grit plus skill. We already know there's 20 to 25 goal pop there. Does he get to 30 playing in top 6 minutes on the power play? Do you envision him as a potential straight replacement for Kreider? I mean, I don't think you have to squint too hard to see that, right? So it would be completely it would be a very good move, smart move to lock him up. That said, like, would they give him 8 years? Would Cooley take 8 years? Because sometimes the players don't want to. They want to bet on themselves. I think in some cases, Dave, I don't know if this is true all the time, but the players might turn down the bridge deal or turn down the long-term deal because they can see a higher payday in the future.
That's true. And Will Cooley is going to turn 24 middle of next season. So an 8-year deal takes him to 32 years old. Let's say he does 5 years, takes him to 29.
Mm-hmm.
5 years from Evolving Hockey is $4.5 million. I still do that. And even with the 10%, 5 years, $5 million, I still do that in a heartbeat. And I'm hoping that's what this is for. But the way things have been presented this offseason is I think the Rangers are going to be very in on Vlad Gavrikov, hopefully not to the point where they give him Adam Fox money. And that's a huge concern of mine because he's going to get, maybe not Adam Fox money, but Jacob Chikrin money. What, Chikrin gets 7x7?
I think that's
like
right.
That. Gavrikov is not a 7-year, $7 million defenseman. That's your Jacob Trouba contract again. Are we going to learn from our mistakes? Enough is enough. I like Gavrikov. I like him at 4 years, $5 million, $5 to $6 million. So what? $5.5, $6 million, $6 million being the ceiling. I'm fine with that. But if the Rangers are in on him for anything more than that, it's a disaster waiting to happen. And then the other thing is sending an offer sheet of their own, which makes no sense because they don't even have their second round pick next year.
Right. And I was going to ask,
it's with Utah.
I was going to ask about that as well. The potential, I guess it was Elliot Friedman reported. Was it Friedman? I can't remember.
Friedman with the JJ Peterka thing.
Yeah.
And Peterka is empty calories. I like Peterka, but you need to play. I'm so sick and tired of these guys that can't drive play. They sit there waiting for somebody else to make something happen. You know who drives play? You know who makes things happen? Marco Rossi. You know what position he plays? Center. I'm so sick and tired of wingers that don't drive play. And I know I'm getting a little bit angry about this, but this is where I think it's going. I think they're actually going to wind up offer sheeting Peterka and sacrificing the 12th overall pick to Pittsburgh this year, and then the 1st and the 3rd next year. We're not going to see a first-round pick until I'm 90.
Well, right. And is JJ Peterka worth that? I mean, I do think he's what I will say is, and I've seen his metrics and stuff like that. Again, bad Buffalo team. He does outscore his expected goals by a lot, which is always something to
He's
raise.
Horrible defensively.
Yeah, no, for sure. But does that get better under Mike Sullivan, right? As opposed to the shit show that is Buffalo.
That's fair. That's fair.
JL, how would you feel if the Rangers offer sheeted Peterka?
I'd be okay with it, honestly. I mean, it depends on what the offer is exactly, because you can only give up so much draft capital after a bit. I like Peterka. I like his size. I like what he could potentially bring. Because again, you really do have to factor in the fact that Buffalo is a tire fire, and I think a lot of teams noticed that. I mean, the Florida Panthers noticed that almost immediately, and Sam Reinhart's now basically a legend in Florida.
That's
so
a very good example.
so
Very good example.
so what's to say that wouldn't happen here? I think there's a lot of redeeming qualities to Paterka's game, and it kind of fits the type of player that Drury's trying to get. Because if you think about it, let's say you put a Paterka with a JT Miller or even a Will Cooley, maybe it comes out more, what he was really supposed to be or what he can be, because we've seen him do this, especially against the New York Rangers.
Oh, he scores every game they play them. It's
every
insane.
game they
every
play.
single game.
Right.
Yeah.
He's basically turned into Jeff Skinner, which for a very long time, and even somewhat still to this day, Jeff Skinner, every time he played the Rangers, would score. So
you have invoked Jeff Skinner. Sam is going to be somewhere. She's going to pop up somewhere.
Well, I'll just mention in the chat and I'll bring her out. But the thing is that if this is Peter Laviolette, I'd be somewhat against it. And look, you guys know that I was a big Laviolette guy, primarily because, Sullivan wasn't available, but also at the time he was the best possible coach. But we clearly saw that there was some deficiencies in what he was able to do, and the act wore out quicker than most of us thought. But now with Mike Sullivan, we've seen what he can do with players who are, not exactly, the greatest of talents. I mean, it also helps that he had, arguably one of the greatest players of all time on his team. But, he was able to take a lot of underperforming Penguins teams, even with Crosby, that, he was able to take them and really make them better than what they are. So when it comes to a guy like Paterka, I wouldn't be against it. It just all depends on how much it is. Because then if you're sacrificing a ton of draft capital for a guy who, you could use for something else, then I just think that's really bad asset management. But I'd be all for it, though, for the right price.
I mean, I think the Reinhart point is such a good one.
It is.
Because you could envision a scenario. And the only thing I'll say is, though, again, the flip side to that is it's very easy to look at the Florida Panthers and be like, let's do that. Let's be that. And like, when in reality, it's not really something you can actually replicate, right? You have to sort of you have to forge your own path ultimately. Now, the Panthers did, in very similar fashion to the Rangers, won a President's Trophy, kept crashing out of the playoffs, decided they needed to change their identity, got Tkachuk. Obviously, Joel Quenneville was their coach, before he was suspended from the job due to his involvement with the Blackhawks sexual assault scandal. They landed on Paul Maurice and it worked out. I don't think Paul Maurice was considered a surefire great coach. He seemed like kind of another retread, and I'm sure there were lots of laughs around the hockey world and certainly around our circles when he was hired. If we go back and check our group chats, I'm sure we were like, really, Paul Maurice? And they're well on their way to at least right now, looks like they're going to go up 3-1 in the Stanley Cup final and win it a second consecutive cup. But I do think it's a valid point, JL. Like, they see Paterka could be the next Sam Reinhart, right? He could come here, become a little bit more of a play driver, leverage his size and skating ability, score 40 goals a year, and be a legitimate top line wing on a contending team. It's a risky bet. I have no idea if Sam Reinhart's metrics were as kind of all over the map as Paterka's are when he was in Buffalo, but I do think there is a quality of teammates and quality of team element there that needs to be taken into consideration. So
for you, when was he with Buffalo?
Reinhart, up until about probably 20 up until 2021.
Yeah,
So
that's fair.
2021. Buffalo, he had tremendous defensive metrics. He wasn't much of a play driver offensively, but I don't think he's ever been an offensive play driver. And he went to Florida and it just went through the roof.
Yeah, he was with Buffalo from 14-15. Well, his first full season was 15-16 through 2020-2021. Yeah.
But like you said, he's a center, not a winger. That's my problem with Paterka. We have 9,000 wingers.
Yep.
Getting Peterka is like having Sidious return in the last Star Wars movie.
Somehow Palpatine returned.
Guess what? He's alive.
He's alive. Oh, great.
Guess what? We got another fucking winger. We don't need another fucking winger. Sorry.
Okay.
No, it's a good point. I totally.
Let me just say this though, because so all of this depends on whether they get another center, right? Or maybe
they're
they're
last week.
I'm aware of that. But
I just wanted to remind everybody.
No, clearly I know what I said. But the thing is,
my wife just texted me if I'm allowed to curse on a podcast.
No doubt.
Well, there you go. You just got your answer. But my thing is that, so what I'm trying to figure out is, so currently your centers right now are JT Miller, right? Who I think, honestly, at this point, I think a lot of us Ranger fans massively underrate. That's just me. Which I have to stop myself from it, because we, us as fans of our own team tend to underrate or overrate our players a little too much, maybe so. But so I think this also just kind of, a lot of this comes from really, because you look at, granted he wasn't the savior, but they did play significantly better when he came back. I mean, obviously it wasn't a massive improvement, but they definitely did get better in many ways just off his presence on the ice alone. So it all depends on whether you want Zibanejad to be your third C, which, that's been very well documented how we feel about that. I know, Rob, you're very vocal about that, with him being more of a shutdown checking center for third line, which obviously would probably be more reasonable now, considering Kreider is gone and you don't have that tether anymore. And then you have Trocheck as your second center, which honestly is not the worst thing, especially if you're going to try and go get another center next offseason. Because what I think is going on here is they're trying to be competitive while moving a lot of pieces. I know we've said this before. It's something we've echoed a lot throughout the season. But I think now with the offseason, there's a lot more time, and you can expend resources differently than you would during the regular season. It's a bit of more of a crunch where the trade deadline comes around. But now that you have more time and cap space, which I think personally, that's what was trying to happen last offseason. But because of the whole Trouba, nonsense that went down and the whole Goodrow thing, I think that kind of put a halt to everything. So I think the plan that he was trying to do last season is what he's attempting to do. So now when you look at a guy like Peterka, he fits. If you put him with a guy like JT Miller, because then JT Miller drives play, he's good enough to do both, and Peterka can finish it. That's how I see it. And he has the ability to do that. Whether or not that happens or not remains to be seen. This is all purely speculation. This is just going.
Fitting him. Who else is going? Because you need a spot for Perot. You need a spot for somebody like Offman or Berard.
I don't think Perot starts the season here. I probably at this point, because I'm trying to think of who they could bring in. The only person I can think of, honestly, is Sam Bennett, that they would bring in to kind of bolster the depth down the middle.
And he's going to get $9 million from someone.
Yeah,
so
I want nothing to do with Sam Bennett.
That's not right. Happen.
So unless Drury is just burning stuff, or just taking a match and lighting things on fire, I think Zibanejad goes down to center. Peterka plays up, and you basically just fill out the rest. I want him to prove me wrong. I don't think Gabe Perreault starts the season off on the team. Do I want him to? Of course I want.
I don't think he does either. And I actually think that's probably a good thing.
Yeah. That's you want to, yeah, because if I got to see him play, Perreault play a couple times. I went to some games at the end of the season, especially I went to 2 of his games at the end of the season. I went to the Minnesota Wild overtime winning game, which was his first, which he almost had a couple points, but good job Lafreniere for missing an easy tap in.
Yes,
and then I was at the Flyers Ranger game. That was the final game for Sam and JD. And the only reason why I went to that game was because the ticket was like $40. So of course I'm going to say yes. But in those games, I got to watch Perreault kind of move around the ice. and I said this on the podcast before, but I'll say it again, obviously for now, is clearly you can tell he has a really good vision for the ice. But the thing is that he just needs to put a little bit more size, play kind of this sort of professional, because college is a completely different story. He puts on a little more size, works on the skating a little bit, but he knows where to go, knows where to put the puck. He just needs to have that experience, and I think he'll be fine. He'll make more of an immediate impact than Othman. But for the time being, though, you can get Peterka, round things out, Othman, Berard, and then you just kind of have, the rest of the guys kind of either as spares or fit into parts where, Kreider would be usually in. And Zibanejad is your third line center. That's not a bad thing. I know we hate on Zibanejad,
Disagree.
but you also, but I guess this can lead into something else that we'll talk about is, at what point or how and when will or if Zibanejad will get moved in the first place?
Well,
That's honestly the big question here.
So
no, it's not. Well, yes, it is a big question, but the bigger question is, when are we going to allow a coach in particular, Mike Sullivan, to do what he does? He has developed no-name wingers into stars. Like he did not have any first-round wingers with those Penguins teams. Now he had Jake Gensel, he had Brian Rust, he had who's the third one?
Connor Sherry, but he was more of a checker. But yeah, no, he also played in their top six when he needed to.
Yeah, and you gotta give these kids we go through this every year. When are we going to give these kids a chance? This is a transition season. We're not going to be cup contenders next year. I think we can all agree on that one. We're not going to be cup contenders next year.
No.
Let these kids figure it out. Let them play with JT Miller. Let them play with Vincent Trocheck. If Zibanejad's still here, let them play with Mika Zibanejad. Let them learn and grow and stop going for, as we always go, with the shiny new toy that pushes these kids down the lineup. Get a position you need, not another winger. Let's see what Barreau can do. Let's see what Othman can do. Let's see what Berard can do with a coach that knows how to coach a system, a simplified system that has gotten productivity and turned guys like them into perennial all-stars.
So Dave, what has to happen, and if you covered this last week, I apologize, for the Rangers to land Marco Rossi, right? So he's the guy you want, and I think that makes a lot of sense. What is the chain of events that has to happen? Because I assume that involves Mika Zibanejad moving on, but maybe I'm wrong about that.
I mean, from a realistic standpoint or from a my pipe dream standpoint?
Try to do it.
They're two completely different answers.
All right. Well, yeah. We'll do the pipe dream first, because that's the easy one.
Yeah. I mean, the pipe dream is it is the easy one. Bill Guerin has said numerous times he wants a veteran center. Mika Zibanejad's a veteran center.
Mm-hmm.
He might waive for Minnesota because A, there's a direct flight to Sweden that only adds an hour to his wife's commute. B, Matt Zuccarello was there.
Mm-hmm.
And C, it's a playoff team.
Mm-hmm.
And D, Minnesota, I feel like it's got the same weather as Sweden. I don't really know.
I think it's probably very similar, yeah.
It's cold.
And E, he doesn't have the New York media and the New York fan base coming after him all the time.
And Minnesota's not an easy town to play in, but I do think it's a little more forgiving. Yes, I think that's fair.
But the real answer, Chris Drury can't be GM. He's not going after a 5'9" center, no matter how good he is.
Yeah, I mean, you're probably right, but like Rossi as the 2C makes so much sense, and then Trocheck shifts down to 3C, and like you're pretty set there. Also, I mean, I agree with you too. Like, yes, JL. I mean, you're right in the sense that, like, is there a world where Zibanejad's your third line center? And again, with Mike Sullivan at the helm now, he gets more out of Zibanejad. Zibanejad's a little bit more re-engaged. He wants to prove people wrong. He wants to prove Drury wrong, right? You know, especially whatever. But I also think it's probably fair to say, like, the clock is ticking on his tenure here. Like, it kind of does feel a little bit beyond its expiration date. And there is, and I think we know this is true because it's been reported by Brooks and pretty much every regular writer that covers the team, that a lot of what Drury is doing, yes, obviously he wants to build this team to be a contender again, but it's first and foremost about getting the old guard out of significant leadership positions as quickly as possible, right? He's committed to Miller, he's committed to Trocheck, he's committed to Fox and Shesterkin. Almost everybody seems to think Panarin's going to be here next year. That it's just they're just going to hang on to him and not even bother trying to trade him. Take that or leave it. Certainly with all the news that came out about him in April has colored people's opinions, I'm sure, but I think they also are just looking at like it's 1 year left on the deal. You could probably trade him at the deadline too. He becomes, if they are not in a playoff spot, he becomes probably the number one trade target in the entire league. And that's a pretty decent chip to hold on to if you're not in playoff contention next year. So I get why they're probably hanging on to him, but Zibanejad and Miller, it's been very heavily reported that they are both, if the Rangers could find deals for both of them, obviously working through Zibanejad's no move clause, that they would readily trade both of them. So as much as I agree with you, JL, I do think that the more likely scenario, like if Chris Drury had his way, Zibanejad would be off the team.
Oh no, I get that. I just don't think he'll do it. Not that because he doesn't want to do it. I just don't think anyone will take him. That's just me.
And will he waive? I mean, there's been speculation that he's more likely to waive now that Kreider's been traded, but I'm not so sure about that.
I don't buy that. I think he just from judging off of the comments that he made on the day when everybody left, I think he's gonna turn anything down.
Yeah.
And honestly, but that's why I say that. Not that I don't think that, moving him it's the same question you pose with Kreider. It's emotionally, because Mika's been just as good as Kreider has been for this team. Granted, he hasn't been here as long as Kreider, but he's still had a pretty significant impact on this organization. You're looking at one of the better centers this team has had over the last 5 or 10 years or so. But hockey wise, if you're really trying to do the things that Drury's trying to do, then you really have to sort of make that hard decision to let him go. But the thing is that with that contract, and I just don't think it's going to happen. Maybe not this offseason, maybe next offseason. But if it does, I will be genuinely surprised. And that's why I think he'll be here next year. And I'm kind of just sort of bracing myself for that. I mean, it's not a bad thing. I think he's if ultimately if they end up getting another center to fill in another spot and they put, Mika on the wing with Miller, then that's fine. But there's so much that can happen between now and, July and even August that it's sort of a good thing and a bad thing, because then, there's a lot of scenarios into play. And also you really don't know what Drury's going to do. Honestly, it's really hard to tell. Like Dave said, it's really hard to figure out what exactly is going to happen because so much is up in the air. Who's going to be captain? That's a significant question. Who is the leader of this team? What is Mike Sullivan's identity? Are the guys on this team fitting the identity? Because it's a completely different defensive system. So who knows that maybe it's just more of a plug and play type of thing.
Yeah. And it's also not just systems thing. Identity too is just, are they going to play hard every night? I mean, that's just, as crazy as it sounds, that's really what was missing from their game last year, especially. It was just that it got to a point where they were so disconnected emotionally and in terms of what was required to win. They had way more talent than most of their opponents. The Rangers' top end talent was never in question, but they were not cohesive. They were not playing hard. They were not playing for each other. And that can look a bunch of different ways in a bunch of different systems, but when you see it, and the Rangers did not have it. Do we have any questions from fans?
There is one on there is one on Blue Sky. I'll pull that up really quickly.
So while JL's pulling that up, I just want to touch on one thing. And I'm repeating myself from last week only because, Rob, I want to make sure you hear it, and I'm going to keep reiterating it. The same way Brian Boyle had to be the Rangers 4C in 2013, 2014 for the Rangers to really be true cup contenders, Vincent Trocheck has to be the Rangers 3C.
Mm-hmm. I couldn't agree more.
100%.
Couldn't agree more.
I will say it's the hill I die on this offseason. I love Peterka. He's not the right player for the Rangers.
Yeah. Well, and also, isn't it so ironic? You look back at the way 2 seasons ago started, Trocheck was the 3C. So that was Laviolette's original plan.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
He's not an idiot. And you know, I know you brought this up before, JL. I didn't mind Peter Laviolette at all. I think what happened was I think he saw the toxicity brewing last year and he basically checked out. He was like,
Yeah.
this is not my mess to clean up. I think he was basically like, he was on a 3-year deal. He was like, I was brought in here to coach a highly skilled veteran team and get us to a Stanley Cup. And once that became not the assignment, he was like, okay, I'm not interested in that anymore.
Yeah, no,
So,
you could
simple as
tell.
that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you could also just tell off of the way that he answered questions in the post game. He was you could tell when someone's checked out. And
100%.
normally, the first season, the President's Trophy winning season, obviously, being the best team in hockey, you have a little bit more, gumption in your speech. But even at the beginning of the season, he was a little bit more engaged. He was, he seemed like he wanted to give you the right answer. But then after a while, he was just giving the same boilerplate answers because he honestly probably didn't really know how to answer it. So, you're right. It's really wasn't his mess to clean up. And I think that, he wanted to get out as soon as possible. So I think, you could just tell something changed because somebody like Peter Laviolette, who's had massive amounts of success in other teams who are far less talented than this current iteration, you could tell something was up. So
Totally.
So I have the question pulled up here. So this comes from, it's only one question, but thank you. This is and I love this name, the Gerard Gallant slander account at Alan T. Anderson at bsky.social.
That's a great name. I love it.
It's a great name. I absolutely love it every time he comments, but he does come up with some pretty good stuff to answer. So I also appreciate that. So he says, pure hypothetical, which one of these players is said to be available with Thrive in Sullivan's system best? And he names Marty Necas, JJ Peterka, and Jason Robertson. Then he has a quick follow-up that says, who are you most excited about seeing in Sullivan's system who is already on the team?
Oh,
I love these questions. All right. So
I love that question. That's a good one.
I'll start. I want to say, sorry, it was Necas, Peterka, and Robertson.
And Jason Robertson, yes.
I mean, I want to say, I was going to say Peterka because he's kind of like the least talented of the three, but I actually think it's Robertson. Robertson is first of all, he's obviously already a premier player in this league, but I think Sullivan, like, and playing for Sullivan in and for the Rangers, like, I think he could potentially achieve another level. So I'm going to say Robertson for that one. The current Ranger, who I guess most excited to see play for Sullivan. I honestly think I'm just going to say Brett Berard. Brett Berard, like, just he looks exactly like one of those unheralded pain in the ass Pittsburgh Penguin wingers that like you mentioned before, Dave, like a Brian Rust or a Sherry. He probably does not become the type of high level goal scorer that Gensel became, but he showed me so much last year. Like his energy and just like work rate on the ice were unmatched. Especially like later in the season when like a lot of the team was frankly dogging it, like he really stood out. He also scored 5 goals, and not, that's not to say like I'm not giving up on Brennan Othman, but I have to say I was pretty disappointed that he wasn't able to. I mean, what did he have? A couple of points. He had like 2 or 3 assists in 20 some odd games.
Yeah, he
didn't score a goal. This is a guy who scored record amounts of goals in junior. He scored plenty in the AHL. For him not to score a goal was pretty disheartening for such a heralded prospect. And whereas Brett Berard came right in and like popped a few goals in within his first 6 or 7 games. And he just plays that high energy, up the ice, forecheck style. I think he could be a total pain in the ass. That's basically been the scouting report on him since college. He's like a Mike Sullivan player to a T. So I'm going to say Berard.
There might be a future line of Othman, Trocheck, Berard, and good God, that line would be a bitch to play against.
Yes, and that's when was the last time the Rangers had a line like that, like Callahan, Dubinsky, and whoever that their winger was?
Oh wow, I remember.
Artie
right?
Anisimov.
Yeah, right. Dubinsky,
Yeah.
Callahan might be the next stick coming of that line. And you need that. You need that type of pain in the ass.
that
They
line.
just haven't
Mhm.
had that. Yeah.
Yeah. Are you gonna answer the question?
You want me to go
Jay?
next?
Yeah, go ahead.
All right. So, in terms of the first part, which would be that might be available that would thrive, the answer, I feel like this is a cop out because Robertson is by far the best player of that trio, and Robertson has that sneaky, gritty style to his game that is often overlooked because he's put up 100 points. So people say, oh, he's a 100-point winger. He doesn't play a gritty game. No, he gets to the front of the net. He digs into corners. He's very good.
He looks like he's 4 years old too, which I think contributes to it. Like he like
Yeah,
can't
he
grow.
does
He's
look
one of those
good.
guys that can't grow a beard. Like he just has a baby face.
Nice. And then I'm going to go a little off the board on who I'm most excited to see in Sully's system, and it's Alexis Lafreniere.
Ah,
There's a reason
love
for that.
Oh yeah.
There's a reason for that.
He's still on the
And
team.
he's still on the team. B, I don't think the Rangers are going to trade him. And C, and this is the big one. If you guys don't follow Slim Cliffy at slimcliffy.bluesky.social, Alexis Lafreniere's 5-on-5 numbers, his scoring chances, scoring chance contributions, scoring chance assists, and rush chances and cycle chances per 60. All of this is all offensive generation numbers. He compares to two players that started slow and then in their fifth year all of a sudden turned it on. Player A is Brandon Hagel, and player B is Jake Gensel.
Ooh,
Yeah.
I like that.
I could see
who
that.
Jake Gensel played for. Mike
Pittsburgh
Sullivan.
Penguins.
Lafreniere also has more raw skill than both of those guys.
Lafreniere is by far more skilled than both of those players combined. You give Lafreniere the opportunities that Gensel got with Sully, Lafreniere's a 100-point player.
Oh, 100%. Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
then if you could go and get Jason Robertson for Will Cooley and Braden Schneider, now you got Panarin, now you got Laff, and now you got Robertson. You got 3 100 points. I know obviously not all three are going to score 100 points. That's not realistic. But you got two guys who have put up 100 points, and you got one who might profile to put up 100 points if given
JT Miller has a 100-point season under his belt too,
JT
right?
Miller too. Yeah, obviously all four of them aren't going to put up 100 points. The Rangers would score 900 goals if that happened. But yeah, I think giving up on Laff right now is a huge mistake. Huge.
I agree.
I would agree too. I also think that, look, he's the kind of guy. He's certainly in a bit of an enigma, but he responded well 2 seasons ago under a new coach. I would expect him to respond well this season under Sullivan, and then it's about consistency from then. But he is worth giving a shot. You just gave him the contract. Maybe he stays on the left side now. That's another thing that maybe Larry Brooks wrote or Molly Walker in there, kind of recap of the Kreider trade, like in the downstream effects that it might have. Like now you might get, that stability with Laff, although he did fine on the right side, but he's a natural left winger. Maybe you just put him back there. It's his natural spot, helps him adapt to the system more quickly. I think that's certainly a good shout. And I'm in no rush to trade him unless it's for, Robertson or another kind of like premier player.
For that question, I'll say it's tough, but I think the player that I think would fit the best in Sully's system in terms of just like outside, I think it'd be Robertson because, basically for all the reasons you just listed, but also to the kids, just stupid good. I mean, there's only so much that you can put on talent, but Robertson has a mix of both, and I definitely think that, in my pipe dream that's going to become a reality at some point. On the team currently, still on the roster, I think it's going to be Mika Zibanejad. And the reason why I say that is because I think Sully will find a way to motivate him properly to where they will deploy him as needed and allow him to really get the most of what you have in him so far. He's still got a lot of skill. There's, you can't take that away from the guy. But right now, I think it's Mika Zibanejad on the team. I think he'll thrive in Sully's system the most. Remains to be seen, but I think it'll happen.
All right. Before we wrap this up, I want to do a quick, let's call it rapid fire for both of you guys. I just want to get your try not to think too much about it. Just give me your immediate answer that comes to your head. I want to know the % chance you think the following 3 players will be on the Rangers when the season starts in October. All right. Dave, you first. What is the % chance that Mika Zibanejad is on this roster in October?
97%.
JL?
65%.
Yeah, I think it's like 75%.
Mm-hmm.
Keandre Miller, Dave.
0%, but that's a dumb move too.
Wow.
Depending on who they get back.
You think he's 100% out of here?
Yes. I've heard it from, obviously we're hearing Larry Brooks saying it, but I also have it from a couple of people that they are actively shopping him.
But okay, so let's stay on that. Sorry, I said we were wrapping up. What kind of trade are they looking to make involving him? Because to me, it makes 0 sense to trade him unless you're getting an impact player back.
I know. I wish
it makes 0 sense. It doesn't make any sense.
It doesn't make sense. And he's so skilled, and he's like, if Laugh is my 1A of players I want to see under Sully, Keandre Miller is my 1B because he can fill. If Adam Fox is your Chris Letang, Keandre Miller could be your Justin Schultz.
Yeah, and again, if this was bringing back a center or an impact player that was under contract and was going to be part of the core moving forward, then okay, you got to give to get. These types of trades happen in basketball all the time, right? You trade your young star for a more established player. That I could live with that and understand it, but if it's just, and it's not really a cap dump, the guy doesn't have a contract. So I'm wondering what could the trade be? I don't know.
Everybody's going with Bowen Byram. That seems too easy.
It does. That doesn't make any sense for either team, I don't think.
No,
it makes no the same risk. Yeah.
Listen, if they do it for Marco Rossi, fine. I'm fine with that.
100%. Yeah. All right. So Dave says, JL, what do you say? Keandre Miller, % chance he's on the team next year?
25%.
Yeah, I'm gonna go. I'm there too. 20%.
Yeah, I still think that I think the Rangers know how good Miller is. I think it'd be a mistake to trade him, even though I've had my differences in the way that he's played. But I'd like to see how he would be in Sully's system. And I ultimately think at the end of the day, they end up keeping him, and he ends up proving a lot of people wrong.
God, I hope so.
Last one, Will Cooley, % chance he's on the roster.
100%.
Yeah, 100%.
Okay.
Easy.
Yeah, I mean, his name's been out there a little bit, I suppose, but again, that would be in more of a big kind of blockbuster type trade. So
yeah,
those
if you
don't
can
happen
get
often.
Jason Robertson, you give up Will Cooley. That's your Matt Kachuk trade.
That's the only way I'd rid of him is if they got him in return.
Awesome. All right, guys, this has been a blast. So good to be back.
Yeah.
Welcome back. It's good to have you to keep me and JL in check because otherwise this would have turned into a Simpsons quote fest.
Yeah, we would have killed somebody by now.
We can do bonus episode that's just Simpsons quotes.
Oh,
entire hockey analysis based in Simpsons quotes, and we'll do Family Guy quotes too, so that Rob, you can kind of chime in as well because I feel like Family Guy better than Simpsons.
I do. I know. I mean, I'm not like an expert. I'm not fully, memorize the canon, but I've got a few that I can call up. Sure. So,
animated TV show quote episode coming soon to a podcast near you.
That's going to be the summer content.
All right. Well, I'm excited to do this again, I guess in a week or, we'll see what happens. I don't think we'll be starved for Ranger news. That's for sure. We got a draft coming up. We'll have a Stanley Cup champion crown pretty soon. And keep listening to Live from the Blue Seats and we'll see you next week.